welcome along. My name's Christy Spire. I'm the team leader of nature education here at Green Adelaide. And many of you have been a part of these fantastic webinars over this year, and I can't believe we're in October already. I'd like to start by acknowledging the country that we're meeting on, and I'm looking out to the beautiful sunshine today. I'm from central Adelaide here, Ngadlu Tampanthi, Ngadlu Ghana, Yatanga, Imparente. And that means that it's right and good to acknowledge that we're meeting on Ghana country today. And I hope you can stop and acknowledge wherever you're coming from today and people's ongoing connections to country and all of those diverse connections over many thousands of years. It's an exciting reminder to stop and do that. So thank you for taking that time. This is the 9th instalment of our seminar series, or webinar that we're calling it now, which we are running to help share the great work happening to make Adelaide cooler, greener, wilder and more climate resilient. This session is being recorded and will be available on the Green Adelaide YouTube channel, where you can find all the other webinars in our series as well. You are invited to ask questions at any time by putting them into the chat, and we will answer as many of these as we can at the end of the session. So there's not, your microphones won't get turned on, but you can have some interaction in the chat, which is always excellent. And we've had some great conversations through there as well. So as you can see on the screen, today's webinar is called The Transformation of the River Torrens, Fish, Flows and Habitat. And today's webinar actually coincides with Nature Festival that I hope many of you have been able to inhabit. I know a lot of our staff team have been doing some awesome things and jumping in the river with their waders on with Sylvia today. Lots of other things as well. I did have a slide that's not coming up to encourage you to participate in the community waterway portrait, which is as easy as taking a picture of yourself with a body of water close to you that you feel a connection with. And it will be transformed into an ongoing art piece that the fantastic Laura Wills, who's the artist in residence at the moment with the Nature Festival, but she also does lots of other awesome art and environmental projects around Adelaide. So please check out her work more fully as well. I encourage you to do that, but we'll send through the link for that so that you can get outside after today's session and take a photo of yourself or your family with some water close by to you. So we thought it would be a great theme to connect with Nature Festival, because the theme this year is flow, and a perfect opportunity to talk about Adelaide's most iconic river, the Karrawirra Pari, or the River Torrens. And we're here to celebrate how far we've come actually in repairing past damage, and to recognise the partnerships, science and community efforts that are bringing the river back to life. For many, the Torrens still carries the memory of being degraded and polluted, but as we'll hear today, that story is changing. Over the next hour, we'll explore how the river has evolved, highlight key restoration projects like Breakout Creek and River Torrens recovery, and learn why freshwater native fish, including the southern purple-spotted gudgeon, are vital indicators of river health. And I'm delighted to introduce two speakers for you today, which is exciting. We've got Dr. Sylvia Zuławska. I knew I wouldn't get your name right. I can edit that out later. From Nature Glenelg Trust, and Tammy Partridge, our own team leader of urban water here at Green Adelaide. So they're going to share the talk today. And I think we're kicking off with Tammy. And so I'll stop sharing my screen and welcome you to set up yours.
So thanks for coming along today. I'm going to have a bit of a chat with you about the Karrawirra Pari. Going to have a little bit of a view at some photos of what it used to look like originally, and then when it was fully degraded, and then the work that's been done over lots and lots of years to get it back to where it is today. And we all acknowledge that, you know, there's always more things to do, but as Christy mentioned, we're just going to celebrate some of the successes that we've had so far, and then hand over to Sylvia, who will talk a bit more about our fish monitoring and the native fish program that she's working on for us. So this is a picture of the Watonga, or the reed beds down at the Breakout Creek, down at what is now the outlet of the River Torrens. So originally, before any amendments were done to the river and the way that it moves through the landscape, that bottom section used to just be reed beds. There was actually no channel joining the river and the ocean. And the water used to meander its way through and work its way through these reed beds, slowing down and being treated on its way through the landscape. That is from around the 1900s. And then when we decided that it was a really fantastic place to live, there was a lot of development around the river, and the river started being used for a rubbish sort of facility. A lot of the resources from the river in terms of the wood, the sand, the rocks, those sorts of things were removed. And if there was a hole left in the riverbed, when things were removed, they used to just fill those holes up with rubbish. So obviously over time that sort of degraded the system a lot. And in this photo you can see, where it's been used as a bit of a quarry, and all of the trees have been removed. There's a lot of erosion on the bank there, and it's not looking particularly fantastic. Around this time, there was a lot of disease being associated with the water, but it was still, people still had to use the water because, they needed that to survive. So they were in a bit of a tricky situation where they were dependent on it, but it wasn't really safe for use. And so obviously now in the times that we're in, we understand that we have impacts on the water quality, and we don't use it in the same way that we used to. However, it is a river in an amended environment, and it does go through a major city. So there are things that we still need to make sure that we manage. And some of the ways that we do this are through the way that we manage rubbish in the river. So this is an example of some machinery cleaning out one of our trash racks, which stop a whole heap of organic material and litter, plastic, metal, all those sorts of things from going down the river. And we pull out around about an Adelaide oval of rubbish and debris each year. If you're interested, there's some really cool videos on the website that you can get at the links below if you have a look on the website and go to the YouTube videos. These are the different sort of systems that are used throughout the region to help keep the system clear. So the net style systems of the trash racks. We also have floating booms, the debris screens around outlets to stop things from going through into the downstream reaches of rivers. Sediment basins, which are really important for taking out nutrients and sediment load, making sure that that doesn't go out into the Gulf. And CDS screens, which take out particulates, and when you're in sort of a confined area that you can't get a bigger system such as a trash rack into. This image just shows you the catchment. So right up the top of that photo, you can see Kangaroo Creek Reservoir, and then a little bit below that is Gorge Weir. So the Green Adelaide region sort of starts around about halfway between Kangaroo Creek and Gorge Weir, and then comes all the way down to the coast. You can see Torrens Lake with that sort of blue squiggly line, a bit thicker there, and the Torrens Lake is a man-made lake. And these little brown things that you can now see, that sort of shows where we've got trash racks and other things in the system that help take out the rubbish. So looking at ways that we figure out what's going on with the river, we have full-time water quality monitoring, and that there's some of those stations there in green. That data is freely available to the public. Anyone can access that, and that can be accessed on those websites that you can see down the bottom of the screen there. And this is just an example of some of the data that you can access on that site. So you can look at flow to see sort of what sort of flows have gone down through the system over time. And then there's also a lot of actual quality information available, water level, turbidity, sediment, pH, those sorts of things. So there's a lot of really good data there, and that sort of backs up the fact that we know that the water quality has been improving in the system over the last decade and more, several decades. And just talking through some new actions that we've got. So we've just started a really exciting project called the River Torrens Debris Project. And we're partnering with Adelaide University for this one. They've just completed the first phase and moving into phase 2. And you can see in the photos there, they've collected a whole heap of rubbish out of trash racks and along transects along the bank of the river. And then on the right-hand side, see them sorting it out into different categories. And that will all get recorded. And then we can use that to track back and see what's coming into the system from where. And that will enable us to focus on how we can really implement some behaviour change, and hopefully over time potentially also legislation change, as we've managed to see with the marine debris project that's run by Dr. Christian Peters from Green Adelaide, which helped to get the single-use plastic ban implemented. Another thing that we look at when we're talking about improving water quality is constructed wetlands and biofilters. They're really important in urban areas. They help with water quality. They reduce sediment and nutrients that enter into the systems and eventually out into the Gulf. They increase biodiversity, and they have fantastic recreation value. Couple examples of that. So this is the Second Creek biofilter, and this one is really cool. There's no sort of open water as such on the surface, but what happens is that the stormwater enters in through the plants and slowly goes in through the different soil mediums, and then it gets stored in that storage tank at the bottom, and then that gets reused to water green community space. It's a really fantastic way of keeping, water in our urban areas and being able to reuse it for greening and biodiversity and public enjoyment. So the fantastic aerial shot of another wetland. So this is Fourth Creek wetland, and you can see massive community value here. Lots of people use this space for recreation. And the water moves its way through the different pools on its way through the system, and it gets filtered and ends up being really good water quality compared to how it comes in from the urban landscape. And some big projects, just looking at some rehabilitation in action. So these two photos are of Breakout Creek, which is the area of the River Torrens that's down near the outlet. And Ghana name is Karrawirra Pari. So this is stage 2, and the top photo is during construction, and the bottom photo taken about 12 to 18 months post-construction finishing. And if you could see another photo now, that vegetation has just gone ballistic. Lots of native veg put in there, and a really good community space. This just shows you a map of the 3 different stages of Breakout Creek. The last stage, stage 3, a lot of you are probably familiar with. It's been recently completed, and that's provided an amazing recreational and cultural value. A little bit of the process that we go through in such a project as Breakout Creek Stage 3. So from the top left, that's an aerial photo before anything started. So it was a very straight channel, not a lot of vegetation along the banks, just grass. And then down on the bottom left, November 22, that shows during construction when we were starting to put some of the features in, like the off-stream wetlands, and just making it a little bit more complex, and allowing the water to slow down a little bit to provide different areas of habitat for some really amazing native species. Hundreds of thousands of native plants went into this development, and they were specifically targeting habitat for rare and threatened fauna species. And that vegetation is looking quite amazing. now, as you can see on that bottom right. Another really cool project is the River Torrens Recovery Project that's been running for 11 years with an amazing group of partners. And that project has been working on pest management, so primarily woody weeds, but also some pest animal species like carp being managed in Torrens Lake. So that has been running for a long time, and the partners are amazing. They all work collaboratively together, and recently we had a review done of the 2014 pest management plan. That review was completed last year, and all of the partners had achieved the majority of the actions that were set for them back in 2014. A lot of progress had been made, and we've now got a new 2024 to 2034 pest management and biodiversity plan. So much of the work has been done with the pest management. There is still some weeds left to go, but a lot of it has been done. So now we can move into, a biodiversity focused part of that as well, which is really exciting. That's the project partners for River Torrens Recovery. This is just another example of St. Peter's Billabong, which is a really amazing place if you ever want somewhere to go for a wander. Prior to any intervention, it was looking pretty sad. And then really just primarily through reef edge work with a lot of really cool native species, it was brought back to what it is today. If you haven't been down there, I recommend going for a wander. It's a really amazing place. Lots of beautiful natives, and it's managed by the Friends of St. Peter's Billabong, as well as Norwood Payneham St. Peter's Council. They do a fabulous job in there. It's another little example of the way that we help the system. When we, as humans, modify the system, we put structures in there that act as barriers and for native fish and other animals. So this one on the left is an example of what's called a dental fishway. And this helps the diagamous fish species that need to have part of their life cycle in the ocean and part of it in the river, being able to move between the ocean on the downstream side of the outlet weir and the upstream section during particular times of the year when they're wanting to go between the two, so that they can complete their life cycle stages, and that helps them to be able to breed and to keep going. I think Sylvia will share some information on the fish monitoring that she does. And these are examples. I think there's actually a fyke net in that bottom photo of rock fishways that we are in Breakout Creek. I think this is stage 2, that help the fish be able to get up and downstream of these in-stream barriers. And that connectivity is really important for genetic diversity and for them to be able to have increase their habitat range. And then just a bit of some ideas on how people can help. So urban waterways are really quite amazing. They provide us with a lot of services, but they also have a lot of risks to their health. So there's some really simple things that all of us can do that can help to ensure that they keep improving. One is to choose locally native plants. That's really important. We spend a lot of time and effort getting rid of non-native species from around our waterways. So making sure that we're really mindful about what goes back in to properties that are nearby is really an amazing thing to do. Be mindful if you've got a waterway on your property, if you're building a bridge or a crossing or something like that, please get in touch with whoever your local landscape board is. And see whether you might need a permit for that, or to get some advice on the best way to go about that. The third one is to remove invasive plants so that they can't get spread back into the waterways. Keeping outdoor surfaces pollutant-free is really important. Anything that washes off our properties in an urban area just goes straight into the stormwater drains and obviously ends up going into the river. So making sure that, that there's no harsh chemicals and things being used on the outside of our houses. If we're going to wash our vehicles, wash them on the lawn if we can, or on pervious surfaces rather than concrete and things where it's just going to run off. And the last one is if you've got rubbish and you're cleaning up your leaves or your dog poo or anything like that, to make sure that you're just raking it all up and popping it in the bin rather than blowing it out onto the road for it to end up in the stormwater system. That increases nutrient loads in rivers, which can end up affecting the water quality and giving us things like blue-green algae blooms and those sorts of things. And thank you very much. That's all from me, and I will hand over to Sylvia now for her to talk to us all about native fish.
Thank you for that talk, Tammy. That was wonderful. So much information there, which is excellent. And thank you everyone for listening. I love chatting to people that are passionate about the environment and conservation and fish. So I can't see you, but it's a bit weird chatting like this. But anyway, it's a great platform to be able to get to a lot of people. So I'll keep talking. I'm assuming you can hear me.
Yes, it's all clear. Thanks, Sylvia.
Fantastic. Excellent. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about freshwater native fish species, and thank you for the introduction. And Tammy has already covered on some of the aspects like the fish passage and things like that. But what I'll do is break it down to the 3 sections of my talk. So a bit of an introduction to freshwater fish and why they're important, then a bit of a chat about Western Mount Lofty Ranges environmental flows projects that we do for Green Adelaide, and also some of the conservation efforts that are being done around the area, which are really important. And the photo here, for those that know this fish, is the beautiful purple spotted gudgeon. So these guys are a native species that aren't found much in the wild anymore, but we're aiming to bring them back. So why are freshwater fish important? I love freshwater fish and I love the little guys, the underdogs, everyone knows about the big Maori cod and all the big guys, but the little fish are really important as well, and they get overlooked a lot. So I think they're a really critical part of the system. We've got over 15,000 species of fish worldwide. They're a really important part of ecosystems. So, you can tell a lot about an ecosystem and a waterway depending on what fish are there or aren't there. Whether they're, reproducing in there, whether they've just gone missing from there, those sort of things about environmental changes that are happening, and any sort of reflect prevailing conditions that are happening in the area just by going out and measuring fish species. And they also are a really great way to raise awareness of conservation of areas. So having fish there and native freshwater fish species is really important to areas. So unfortunately, fish is a little bit harder to monitor than something like a koala or a cow or something like that. These guys are quite cryptic, and so it's really hard to see them. This little variegated pygmy perch here, he's just trying to protect his little spot. He lives in this little area and he's trying to protect his little territory there. But we use a lot of different mechanisms to monitor them, such as netting and underwater videos, surveillance, and things like that. But they are very cryptic, and it is hard to monitor fish, but we do get a lot of great data with fish species as well. And you can get some great underwater drones now, which you can see fish and crayfish species. So technology is ever expanding. So South Australia, it's a dry state, and we went through this land drought last year. It was horrific. There was dams that were drying out that hadn't dried for over 30 years. So in that, the land drought was worse than the millennium drought for a lot of those native species and dams and things like that, because there was just no water to fill up dams and fill up those refuge pools and things like that. So we've got 60 species and counting, 7 of which species are not found anywhere else, which is pretty exciting. They range from the little guys like your little gudgeons, the super cute little native fish, to the big guys like the Maori cod. Most of you have probably seen Maori cod or fish for them. They're beautiful big fish. And unfortunately, we do also in South Australia have the introduced species or alien species, which do like to cause a bit of trouble. So, your redfin perch and your trout and your mosquito fish and things like that come in and play havoc. So, fish are in hot water. So, not just in Australia, but all around the world, fish numbers are declining, as are other native fish species, such as crayfish and other animals. We've just published a recent paper that shows that 37% of Australia's 280 freshwater fish species are threatened with extinction, which is quite a high number. And we really, we're doing a lot to turn this around, as is a lot of people are working together and, to collaborate and for this conservation need. In South Australia, over half are considered threatened, which is a huge number. We've lost a number of species such as the olive perchlet, but just hang on, because we are going to bring these guys back in the next month or so. So where these guys, the olive perchlet, have been extinct in South Australia for over 30 years now, but we're hoping in the next few weeks we're going to bring these guys back, which will be really, really exciting. So there's different functional groups of fish. So you've got your wholly freshwater fish, like your big Murray cod. These guys are, they move between rivers and wetlands sometimes, and, they use the different areas to breed, and they've got those specialist and generalist habitats as well. Then you've got your diadromous species that Tammy mentioned earlier, and these guys like to move between the ocean and the freshwater. So you've got your adults that are in the ocean, which they're anadromous, and then you've got your adults which are in the freshwater, which are catadromous. So these guys really like that connection between the freshwater and the ocean water as well. So this photo is a Congolese, and you've got your common galaxids and things like that. That need to move to be able to actually complete their life cycle through these different water stages, which is why those, those fish platforms, for them to be able to move through these fishways, is really important. Otherwise, these fish can't complete their life cycles. Then you've got your estuarine species, which just reside in estuarine areas like your Murray hardyhead. And these guys, like a Murray hardyhead, is a really salt-tolerant species. They love the salty areas. And, they kind of hang out in this area. They can go into freshwater, but they prefer the estuarine areas. And then you've got your sole marine areas, such as a yellow-eyed mullet, which, they still need that connection to sea in the freshwater inflows, but they're the marine species. So fish are under threat, but we can do things to help them and help with conservation. So, you've got those awful alien fish species, and I say awful, it's not their fault they're here. They didn't introduce themselves here, we did. And I do feel sorry for them a little bit, but we need to get rid of them. And it's really, really hard to get rid of alien fish species. You guys have probably heard about talking about getting rid of common carp with the new virus and things like that, which has been, people have been working on for many, many years. The only way, if you've got a wetland or something like that, the only way to really get rid of carp or an introduced species in it completely is to completely dry it out for a number of weeks. This land drought that we had last summer and autumn or spring, it was really bad for native fish species, but it was great to be able to eradicate carp and other introduced fish species in enclosed wetland spaces, because a lot of them dried out, and these carp and things died as well, which was great. You can fish carp and other animals out of these areas, but you're never going to get all of them out. So, decreasing that number of carp in a water body is really important as well, because some areas can have a low amount of carp and still function okay. River regulation, obviously, the waters have been altered in our state. We've got the weirs, we've got flow alterations, wetlands inundated at different levels now. We've got those barriers to dispersal movement. So there is a lot of work, as Tammy mentioned, being done with environmental flows coming down, e-water and fish passage to help improve that. Habitat degradation, well, we can rehabilitate it. So, there's been areas where plants have been taken away, and Tammy showed some photos, and, fish love to have those aquatic plants and the surrounding vegetation, and they love that rocky and wooden habitat in there. They use that to hide in, they use it for food, they use it as their habitat. And even a fish like a purple spotted gudgeon will only lay their eggs on those hard surfaces like a rock or a log, whereas other fish like a little Yarra pygmy perch really need those plants, and they'll only lay their eggs on those plants. So really very different habitats are required for different fish species. Climate change, it's here unfortunately, and we're seeing that in those extreme events such as blackwater events, and the environmental, the fires, the big fires that are happening, and the droughts as well. So building in resilience to some areas is really important. So for instance, if you've got a creek, you can build in some deeper, larger pools in there that will retain water. So at least, you will save a population of that fish species that are there, and hopefully, you can save them to keep them persisting there until the next year, so they can have those future self-sustaining populations and rebuild those populations after the drought happens. Some fish, unfortunately, like Yarra pygmy perch or Murray hardyhead, are down to small patchy populations. This is where we need to do more extreme interventions, like get those fish and pop them into surrogate dams. So they're dams where fish are in, and they breed up in these dams, and then we can use these fish to put back out in the wild. And these sort of dams are really important to, you know, keep these fish populations safe if they do get wiped out in the wild. So managing fish, we do a lot of monitoring and research. So we look at things like where they occur, why they occur there, changes over time and place. We look at, you know, threats that might be happening and try and mitigate those threats. Obviously working with landscape boards and other organisations. All of the data that we capture, and we get funded by the landscape boards like Green Adelaide, that feeds back into their plans, their water allocation plans, their, you know, environmental flows plans. And all of that information is, you know, we work together to be able to help fish and different environmental bodies to make sure we're doing the right thing for the conservation. And also understanding the functional groups of these fish, as I mentioned earlier, is really important as well. So that's fish in a bit of a nutshell, a quick nutshell of fish. But the next bit will be the Western Mount Lofty Ranges Environmental Flows project that we have been working on for about 13 years now. So we've got a fair bit of data for this. And that's funded by Green Adelaide. So that's looking at the South Para, River Torrens and Karrawirra rivers and looking at restoring environmental flows. So you can see here on the map, I'm not sure if you can see my pointer, but basically we've got there's sites down here in the lower Torrens, and they're called, you know, there's a number of sites down there, and I'll just call them the city sites, the city Torrens sites. And then we've also got these other sites, so in the Karrawirra, in the upper Torrens, and also in the South Para rivers that we're looking at. So what we're doing is we use fyke nets, double and single fyke nets. So we put fyke nets in, they're not baited, they're like a long net, which is a funneling effect, and the fish just swim in there. And we use the same amount of nets over each year at each site so that we can compare the data over time and space. And we also always make sure that there's a buoy, a floating buoy at the end, not like a child buoy, but like a white buoy, so that if any turtles or anything go in there, they can get out, you know, and they can breathe. And we set the nets, you know, with sites that have got those fish ladders in them, or the fish passage. We'll make sure we set upstream and downstream as well. So we're looking at what's coming up and down through those fish ladders. We also look at things like how much habitat is there, vegetation, how much rocks, wood, things like that, and the pool condition, whether it's full, how much flow is coming down, and water quality parameters. So how salty the water is. Fish need water, fish breathe oxygen, dissolved oxygen in the water, so how much oxygen is in the water. The pH, fish like to have slightly alkaline pHs, which is great, and also water temperature, which is really important because that affects dissolved oxygen concentrations and other things. So fish of the Western Mount Lofty Ranges, it is a very regionally important fish community there. There's 19 native freshwater fish species recorded, plus 10 translocated natives, such as the freshwater catfish, and we've got 7 alien or introduced fish species, and they do support state and nationally threatened species in the area. So it's a really important area, and the conservation work that's been done in their area is critical to help maintain these fish species. And actually with freshwater catfish, for those that you know, if you've ever walked down the River Torrens near Adelaide, you may have seen a circle of stones in the water. Some of those places are really clear, and that's actually a nest of a freshwater catfish. So these guys will pick up these little rocks and put them in a circle, and that's where they'll lay their nest. They'll make their nest, and they'll lay, you know, breathe in that area there. So you can actually see that from the banks of the River Torrens in some areas, which is really cool. So a little bit of the fish results, and this is just a very broad summary. I won't go through the last 13 years of data, but some of the environmental flow sites, such as the upper Torrens sites, the South Para and Karrawirra rivers, you get your freshwater generalists, so you get fish like your carp gudgeon, your flat-headed gudgeon, dwarf flat-headed gudgeon, and these guys are little native fish, super cute little things. Then you get your freshwater specialists like mountain galaxids, which were really important for the region. You get your diadroma species that we mentioned, such as a congoli. If anyone's ever seen a congoli or held one, they're a beautiful, amazing fish. They're almost like a snake, a really, really strong body that they use to climb up areas. So these guys and the common galaxids are the ones that need to move upstream and downstream to, you know, to complete their life cycles. and they've got those really amazing bodies that they use to climb up areas. And then you've got your estuarine marine species like your yellow eye mullet as well, and the naughty aliens such as the brown trout and eastern gambusia and redfin perch. And the eastern gambusia, for those that don't know them, they're also called a mosquito fish. These guys were brought to Australia to get rid of mosquitoes. They don't do that very well at all. Only little native fish do a much better job. And the problem with eastern gambusia is that they are a live bearer. So they basically just give birth to hundreds of live babies, and then those babies give birth to hundreds of live babies. So once they're in an area, they're almost impossible to get rid of, and they are super predatory on our little native fish eggs. Our little native fish all lay eggs, and then those eggs have to be able to hatch and the juveniles have to go, whereas these guys just bang, they just shoot out all these ready to go fish, and they're super predatory. So then we've got the dilution flue and fish passage sites, which are the ones throughout the Adelaide region, so the River Torrens city sites we'll call them, and that's those fish way sites as well that we monitor our upstream and downstream of. And then you've got your freshwater generalists such as your carp gudgeon, your Murray rainbow fish, your freshwater catfish. You've got your diodromous species again, like your galaxids, your common galaxid and your congoli. We've also got the estuarine marine species that we pick up there, such as your blue spot gobies, your smooth toadfish, black brim, those beautiful fish, and again, those alien species, including common carp. Thankfully, we haven't been picking up a lot of common carp the last few years in those sites, which has been really great to see. So the common carp numbers have declined throughout those sites compared to what they used to be. And you can see here, this is just in the lower Torrens. So you can see here, the blue bar represents the native fish population, the abundance of native fish, sorry, and the orange one is the abundance of alien fish. So you can see here that the native fish do make up a greater proportion than the alien fish in those lower Torrens sites, which is good. But where the aliens are, the introduced fish, they do cause trouble. So, you know, you've got your redfin and your trout, which would just predate on so many of our little native fish. They will gobble up a ton of them a day. You've got your, you know, people have goldfish, and goldfish are cute in an aquarium, but people then don't want them. And so they think, I'll just pop them in a waterway, I'll just release them somewhere. And the problem with goldfish is they're small in an aquarium. They'll grow to the side, they won't grow bigger because they're in an aquarium, but as soon as you put them out, they grow huge and they're destructive as well. Then you've got your carp, and most people probably know about carp. They are bottom feeders, they pull up all the plants, they filter feed, they muddy up waters, and they also predate on our little fish eggs as well. So these guys are really bad for the environment and for our fish species as well. And then we've got carp breeding with goldfish and another whole species. And then you've got a bucket there you can see of one net pulling up mosquito fish or gambusia, so that predate on our little native fish as well. So these guys are, you know, a bit of trouble, but we're doing things, as Tammy said, to try and get rid of them. There's netting being done to get rid of them. There's, you know, drying of systems and things like that. So this shows just a photo of a trout where this is just a small little body native fish species. You can see some flat-headed gudgeon and others that he would have eaten in the last few hours. They haven't even been digested. So next part of the talk is conservation efforts, the fun stuff. So we'll start off chatting about fish passage. And again, Tammy mentioned a little bit about fish passage, but I'll show some photos and talk about it a little bit more. So one of the species that's found in the Western Mount Lofty areas, one of the dominant species, is a common galaxid. These guys need to move between marine and freshwater to breed, and they're sampled at most of the sites throughout the Western Mount Lofty ranges. So the adults, they live in the freshwater, then they go and they spawn in the estuary or ocean, and then the juveniles move back upstream and they live out their lives in the adults as freshwater and redo that cycle over and over again. So these are some larvae that we sampled of the common galaxids, which is excellent because it means that they're able to actually complete their life cycles, which is really important. So this fish passage here that Tammy showed earlier, what they're doing, this is near West Beach. So Breakout Creek is up here at the top, and then this is West Beach, it flows into West Beach, and it's a marine site. And these fish, these common galaxids, are actually using this ladder to climb up, and so they can complete their life cycle, which is really fantastic to see. Before that fish ladder was there, they couldn't do that. So now we're seeing that, you know, these fish are moving right throughout the system through these different fish ladders, which are really, really important. The other critical part is surrogate sites. So, you know, 4 species, southern pygmy perch, yarra pygmy perch, Murray hardyhead and southern purple spotted gudgeon, went extinct, basically extinct from the lower lakes during the millennium drought. Luckily, we're able to capture a small number of each species, working with other groups, and pop them into surrogate sites and put them into schools that were breeding these species up. And now we're at the point where we can start putting these fish back into the wild, into the lower lakes and other areas. So that's actually prevented the extinction of these 4 freshwater fish species. And now Green Adelaide, we've been working with Green Adelaide on an urban wetlands project where we're actually looking at 9 threatened fish species and using wetlands in Adelaide, in the Green Adelaide region, as surrogate wetlands. So this is really important. So instead of just being a carp infested area wetland, what we can do is rehabilitate that wetland, put beautiful plants in it, make it nice and clear again, and then use them to breed these native fish up in them. And not only can we then use those native fish to put back in the wild, but we can also use them as backup populations. So if something bad happens in the wild and we lose them again, we've got these backup safe populations throughout different areas. The more the barrier, because then you spread your risk, and you know, you've got these fish in these areas. So surrogate sites, surrogate wetlands are really important, and they are being used more now because we have to. And the photo is a photo of another olive perchlet, that another one of the fish species of the 9 fish species that we're looking at using, putting back. So we do have quite a few surrogate sites, and even at Monarto Zoo, we've got the crew have just been down to look at the sites at Monarto Zoo today. They're a little bit trickier because we have to make sure that the keepers move the animals out while we're surveying in there, so they don't get run down by a rhino or elephant or anything like that. But it's pretty amazing working with all these different organisations and working together for the conservation efforts of these beautiful fish species. So a bit of a story about the southern purple spotted gudgeon. These guys they were basically lost from South Australia. They weren't recorded for 30 years in the Lower Murray until 2002, when a population was discovered in Jury Swamp. We managed to rescue 55 fish, and they went into captive breeding and surrogate sites. And then we've been able to do reintroductions with them. And this is a really great fish to be able to, for schools to be able to breed. As soon as the temperature gets to 22 degrees in a tank, the female will lay eggs, the male will come and guard them, and they will guard them for about 5 to 7 days until they hatch, and you'll take the fungi off them. And then you want to get the male out of there pretty quick smart, otherwise he'll eat the babies. And you also just need to grade the babies to make sure they don't eat each other if one grows faster than the other ones. So this is a great fish that we've got about 10 schools involved with us, working with us to breed these up and then do fresh and releases back into the wild. And these purple spotted gudgeon have been missing from the Adelaide Plains region for over 100 years now. So one of the things that's really important, you know, Breakout Creek, Tammy showed some beautiful photos of how it's been restored, and there is a lot of great vegetation on the surrounding the Breakout Creek and the River Torrens. So you've got that edge vegetation, but what is missing is that submerged aquatic vegetation. So your Balasinaria is one, or ribbonweed is one. It's a really great plant to be able to get in there, and that provides critical habitat for all sorts of aquatic fauna, such as your fish and your yabbies and your shrimp and things like that. And it also helps to purify the water, you know, to stabilise the channels and things like that. So that's one of the projects we're working with Green Adelaide and others as well, to try and get that aquatic vegetation back into Breakout Creek and other areas in the Torrens. And what we've also done in Breakout Creek is pop some purple spotted gudgeon in there. So we're into our 2nd year of reintroductions of purple spotted gudgeon in the area. And this has been a really special project because the children that have actually, the schools that have been spent a whole year breeding these fish have actually then come out and done the releases of these fish into these waters. So what a special moment for them as well, to watch these fish grow and put so much time and effort into them, and then being able to come out and put these fish back in. And, you know, it's great that the habitat out there has been restored to this sort of level where we can do that now. So obviously a lot of community awareness and community involvement is involved in these projects. And as I said earlier, you know, these are the underdogs, these fish, these little bodied fish. People think about the big Murray cod and, you know, fluffy koalas, which is great. Everyone loves a koala, but these small bodied threatened fish species really, you know, are important as well. And it's great to see conservation actions being done for them. So in summary, these guys are regionally important regions. So Western Mount Lofty Ranges does support a really great community of fish. We've got a great understanding of the fish communities, and that continued conservation efforts and monitoring and engagement and reintroductions are needed to keep these sites going and these fish going, to make sure that those future self-sustaining populations are there. And thank you all for listening.
Fantastic. Also, lots of awesome photos of places that people can visit and species they can find, which is fantastic. It's so good. And yes, let's promote the slippery creatures, not just the cuddly ones as well. And yeah, apparently, Sylvia, you had a very purple spotted gudgeon fan at the local Fish Towers event that you did at Nature Festival. Nat was telling me all about this young person that was very passionate about this particular fish, which was awesome.
Absolutely. It was lovely. It was fantastic. And he'd even drawn these beautiful pictures of purple spotted gudgeon, and so passionate about them. So great to see people of all ages coming out and thinking about these fish.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Fantastic. Awesome. Well, we've got a couple of questions in here, and people feel free to add any more that might be triggered. I think I saw someone trying to raise their hand, but unfortunately we don't have that. I don't think we have that mechanism in here. So pop your question in. So Tammy's already answered Jerry's in the chat, but I think sometimes when you're on these things, you can't always see the chat conversation as well. So I might just get you to respond to that one. So Jerry's question was around the aquifer storage and recovery programs and their impacts on the river flow, and does the intersection of that stormwater assist the capacity challenges that the river system has? But yeah, if you want to explain that a little bit more to other people that may be interested in that question as well. Thanks, Tammy. Yeah,
no worries. Great question. Thanks, Jerry. So yeah, for those of you who can't see the chat, so those aquifer recharge systems are really beneficial. So before we develop urban areas, what happens when it rains and the rain can soak into the ground is that the water stays in the landscape for a lot longer, and it slowly percolates its way through the soil, getting treated on its way down, and it makes its way to our groundwater aquifer recharge areas naturally. And, it sits in the landscape a lot longer. And then once the soil, is really wet, then, you get more runoff going into your rivers and dams and those sorts of things. So when we build things across the landscape, and we've got buildings and roads and all of that sort of thing, it makes the water move a lot faster when it rains across the landscape, and it doesn't have the potential to soak in. So when you put in, storage and recharge schemes, which a lot of the councils in the Green Adelaide region have got, and Jew have been working really closely on that for a long time now, getting that going, which is fabulous. The water can sit there. It ends up in those areas. It sits there, it percolates through, it gets treated, and then it goes and gets into that storage. So it means that it's not rushing across the system and being lost, and then it can be used later to, to green and cool and help with biodiversity back in our urban areas as well. And it does help. The second part of your question, Jerry, it does help. The intersection of that stormwater does help with flooding a little bit. Obviously, when you've got a massive flooding event, things are moving pretty fast, but definitely does help having them in there compared to not. So our rivers and our, urban water systems are, by necessity made to be able to convey flood waters to stop us from having, huge amounts of damage and loss of life and those sorts of things. But everything that we can do to, slow down and when we've got those, sort of low, medium flows and keep water hanging around longer is really great.
Yeah, fantastic and great summary. I think, especially for people that don't think about how the water moves across our landscapes and everything, it's really excellent to be reminded of what that actually looks like and how that affects, life that we don't always think about, particularly when you're in a suburban, urban area as well. So, it's really good to be reminded of that. Awesome. And we've got a bigger picture question here as well, which I think would be nice for both of you to comment on as we finish up today. If we imagine, the healthiest river system that we think is possible, how close are we to that? Because I think what you've shared today is showcasing some awesome wins and some successes, but or do you think we've got a long way to go still? What are some of the barriers, and then what are some of the things that we can do as well? Who wants to start?
You want first or second dibs, Sills?
All yours, Tammy.
No worries. Yeah, so thanks, Nat. That's a massive question.
Bit double-barreled there. Yeah. Yeah,
but that's okay with the philosophical hat on. I mean, for me, like, the healthiest river system possible is one that is, free from any sort of amendment or intervention, right? And that's in terms of, human amendment or pest things being brought in by birds dropping seeds from other areas or anything like that. So that would be like a pristine, starting from scratch, all native, no storages, no development, all of those things. So we're never going to get there. But what we can do is make sure that we do the best with what we've got, and that we strike a really good balance between, the environment and social and cultural and those sorts of things. So, so we need to make sure that we keep going with water sensitive urban design, which really looks at making sure that we are treating water in the urban landscape before it gets out. Someone's put a comment in there about stopping pollution at the source, and that's absolutely right. That's part of the aims behind that River Torrens debris project that I mentioned earlier, is about being able to figure out where sources are coming from, debris and litter and things are coming from, but also, we need to look at the other pollution. So, it's about making sure that we return the vegetation back to as native a state as possible. And as we do those things and we recover that, and we, use water sensitive urban design and re-veg and reduction of nutrients and those sorts of things, and that improves the water quality, which, naturally helps to continue that, that healing of the ecosystems, and, provides the optimal habitat that we can for the native species so that they can thrive. Sills, anything to add?
Thanks, Tammy. I think you sampled, not sampled, because we're not sampling fish right now. You covered that really well, but I think, and just on that as well, so you mentioned that habitat, but really getting that aquatic vegetation in there is, and letting that, and make, if things are turning over by themselves, like if the fish are breeding by themselves, we're not having to put them back in there. If fish are sustainable levels and they're able to move freely through the system, and or whatever it is, turtles or yabbies or whatever it is, and they're, got those self-sustaining populations and the habitat's there for them, the water quality is good, you've got that vegetation also helping with the water quality. All of those aspects there are really important to be able to get those rivers working, functioning at their best.
Well said. Thanks, Sills.
There's a question here which is great, actually, because I was going to ask a little bit more about some of the surrogate sites, which is such a great part of what you're working on. So Andy's asked, has Magazine Creek wetlands been identified as a surrogate site for the rehabilitation of threatened estuary species?
Not as yet. No, it hasn't. So we are still assessing sites. So I'm very happy to have a look at that one, add that one to the list, and talk to the relevant people that need to be spoken to about that. But we are still assessing wetlands as we go.
Yeah. So that was going to kind of be my question. How do people that may have a surrogate site or might want to get involved? Do they just contact you directly, Sylvia, and then you have the contacts to government agencies and so forth that need to be consulted through those processes? Is that how it works?
Absolutely. People can contact myself, and there is quite a process that we go through with surrogate wetlands. So they do have to meet quite strict criteria. You know, we don't want alien fish in there. They need to be isolated. If we're putting a fish that's not native to the area in there, they need to have aquatic vegetation, surrounding vegetation, and water quality needs to be quite good. So we do have quite a strict criteria that we go through. And sometimes some of those boxes aren't ticked, but we can get there, we can adapt, and we can manage those wetlands or those areas so that, you know, we can put vegetation in there, we can put rocks in there or water, whatever it is, or get rid of alien species. So we can manage wetlands to make them suitable as well.
Great. And you mentioned at the top there, there's 7 species in South Australia that are not found anywhere else. So that's our really unique species. Yeah. So it'd be great to share those with everybody. Yeah, but I know that it's hard to go through the names of everything in one webinar, so we'll just make sure. I think that would be great info to share. We always send out information afterwards because there's always a lot to take in as well. And we are, coming up right on time, so that's great. I'll just see if anyone's popped through a last question. Oh, there was a comment also from Nat just around, it would be great to see the aquarium industry provide information at the point of sale about the risks of releasing fish into our waterways and wetlands as well. But are either of you aware of any information that we have in those stores and industries?
I'm not aware of any information, and I know that it is a really big issue because people do get these fish from these aquarium trades, and you can get any fish from anywhere now, and you can just get it ordered, delivered to your house, and then what happens is people don't want them anymore. Some people just release them into areas. There was, you know, we've found all sorts of fish in different areas, and that's a whole introduction of another alien fish species just by putting them in. So big problem. And it's getting bigger because it's so easy to now get fish delivered to your doorstep. So
yeah, wow, I didn't even realise there was a big online service. That's interesting. Yeah, great.
Yeah, and so definitely something that needs to be looked at more about stopping this happening, and that community education about not releasing fish. And, you know, absolutely, it's very important for that to be happening.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, excellent. Yes, well, thank you both for outlining, the community education that needs to be done and all the other projects that I think not everyone would be aware that is going on across the waterways across Adelaide. You've taken everyone on a wonderful journey. There's lots of applauses coming through, and I think we've had up to 70 people online, and I'm sure many people will watch this after the fact as well. So really appreciate your time and preparing for today as well. And we will send everyone follow-up email with the links and different things that have been shared today. And if you do have any further questions, please contact us as well. We will be looking to having our last webinar for this year in November, so please stay tuned for those details. Those that are on our regular mailing list. And if you've got any other themes or topics that you would like to see across 2026, please do make contact with Nat that manages all of this behind the scenes that you would get emails from as well. So thank you all for joining today and have a good evening.
Thanks
See you
for
next
coming,
time.
everyone.
Thanks very much.
See you later.